What is going on, everybody? It is Overreaction Time once again. I'm your host, Simon Samano, and look who I got with me for this big episode of Overreaction Time. It's none other than the fabulous Farah Hannoun. Farah, what's good? How are you?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing great. I mean, we're coming off a pretty wild weekend in combat sports, and we got so many things to talk about. Are you ready to go again?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, Kamikaze, you know the deal. Hit it.
Are you guys that fucking stupid? You can't be that fucking stupid.
MMA Junkie AI.
Who gives a shit? Is that how pound for pound works? In common sense, everybody knows that.
All right, Farah, we're going to start at the very top with UFC 309 this past Saturday at Madison Square Garden, where we saw the return of Jon Jones finally stepping in the cage against Stipe Miocic. Now, the fight, you know, if you've watched this show for the past couple weeks, you know how I felt about this fight going into it. And it played out the way it played out, which we're just about to get into when I tell you this, Farah. Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic was a meaningless heavyweight title fight.
I'm only going to say overreaction for one reason, and that's because it was previously booked for UFC 295. So my whole thing with this was because they booked it, the interim title was only created because Jon Jones was forced out of his fight with Stipe Miocic. How do you just shelve Stipe? That was the only thing. Like it would have been a little bit too much. Do I think that was the fight to make initially? No. But then again, Aspinall was an interim champion, was he? So would have that been? I mean, Jon Jones is already finding Aspinall a tough sell as an interim champion who's defended his title already. So trying to tell Jon Jones to defend his title against Aspinall prior to all that was never going to happen. So the only reason I'm going to say it's an overreaction is because they were already scheduled to fight. Jones ended up being forced out for a year due to injury. What are you going to tell Stipe then? Back off. It's Aspinall. You know the UFC weren't going to do that, especially if that's the fight that Jon Jones wanted,
Sure.
and it was. Yeah.
Okay, so that's fair. That's a fair, but let me come at you from this angle. The meaninglessness of this fight was in what we saw in the cage. It's in what we saw. You know, this reaction coming out of this fight is that this adds to Jon Jones's legacy and he cements his status as the GOAT. Like going into this fight, there was no upside, is what I kept saying over and over again. There was no upside. And what we saw from Jon Jones in there was like, you know, it was a good performance. It was a solid performance. But, you know, if you think Stipe looked like a shell of himself, then how could you possibly think this performance added to his legacy? Am I wrong?
No, here you're not wrong. Here I agree with you. I don't think Stipe Miocic looked like the Stipe Miocic we're accustomed to. The Stipe we're accustomed to, if it was Stipe in his prime, I would have expected him to be a lot faster on the feet. He started out well. It's literally started out, and then it kind of went downhill. He looked a lot slower. He got taken down with relative ease. He got smashed in the ground and pound. And then from then on, he just completely slowed down. So yeah, I credit to Jon Jones for being patient and methodical and surgically breaking him down before getting the finish. The finish was nice, undoubtedly. But yeah, it's hard to say that Stipe Miocic looked like the Stipe Miocic of old. I agree with that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like that, the very first attack from Stipe, you just kind of knew exactly where this fight was going. He was slow, his head was down, it was punch after punch, and Jones was just like calm and casually just, you know, evading and doing what Jon Jones does. Yeah, man, I don't know. Just for me, coming out of this fight, you know, all this praise for Jon Jones and the legacy, this didn't add to his legacy. It just didn't for me. You know, do what you did in the cage against Tom Aspinall. Now that will definitely add to your legacy, right? That'll definitely add.
No, absolutely. I agree. I mean, I understand Jon Jones' standpoint of not wanting to fight Tom Aspinall. I don't know. I from the start felt like a lot of it was a negotiation tactic, but I totally get where he's coming from in terms of him. He's basically admitting that it's a big risk and perhaps not the biggest reward. So he's been very open, which surprised me because he could have just said, I don't know what I'm going to do after.
Right. Okay. So we're going to move to the next thing, which because we're going to stay on some Jon Jones talk for the first few segments here. All right. Spoiler alert. All right. So let me move to the next thing then, because we're starting to touch into it. And let me tell you what my reaction is here. All right. With regard to Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall, UFC 309 also proved that Jon Jones would lose to Tom Aspinall.
Overreaction.
Oh, really? Go ahead. No.
No. I have to say overreaction because then I just feel like I'll be hating on.
You don't
Jon
have
Jones.
to agree with me, but you really think it's an overreaction that what we saw from Jon Jones in there, that if we saw what Jon Jones looked like against Stipe, you don't think Tom takes care of him?
What didn't you like in Jon Jones' performance?
Even though I thought Jon's looked a step slower. I don't think he looked old and slow and over the hill and passed away past his prime, but I thought Jon looked a step slower in there.
What I will say is I didn't like his defensive reactions to when Stipe was trying to strike.
That too.
Yeah,
so that's the thing. So you just set me up there because I thought to myself as I was watching this fight, if that was Tom Aspinall going in with those attacks, and that's the defense that Jon Jones is going to have against Tom Aspinall, ooh, I don't know if that go. I think Tom swarms him.
Tom always tries to swarm everyone. That's what Tom Aspinall does, right? He hasn't really been tested outside of the Arlovsky fight in terms of going into deeper rounds. He just kind of steamrolls everybody. Credit to him, obviously, because he's got power and precision. But Jon Jones, like, he's one of the smarter fighters. Like, he just always finds a way to adapt to somebody's style. I never thought he was going to do that to Cyril Gane. I've been high on Cyril Gane. I know a lot of people are.
As was I.
Yeah, I really thought Cyril was going to give him problems with his movement and his footwork. Obviously, the fight went to the ground right away. I didn't even expect him to sub him that quickly. Yes, I know that Gane got taken down by Ngannou and whatnot. But point being that Jon has good fight IQ. Like he's a guy that finds a way to win, and he knows that he has to weather an early storm with Tom Aspinall, and he knows he's going to try to drag him into the later round. So for me to look at that performance and be like, oh, Aspinall is going to steamroll him, I don't know. Will Aspinall pose problems? Potentially, because he can grapple and he's strong and he's fast and he's got, moves like a middleweight.
Poses huge problems.
But yeah, well, that I had that similar vision when it came to Cyril Gane. Outside of the ground game, I felt like on the feet and stuff, he was going to be a problem for Jones. Now, obviously, we didn't see that. We didn't get to see that because Jones took him to the ground so quickly. But that's what I'm saying. Like, I didn't necessarily think that he was going to trip Stipe so easily like that and cause so much damage on the ground, regardless of Stipe's age and him being away from the cage. So I just think that Jon's fight IQ is often underrated, and I don't feel like Aspinall would work him. I feel like if this fight does get booked, he's fully aware of the narrative surrounding this. He's fully aware of people saying that this guy's going to beat you. I just think Jon Jones has, outside the cage behavior, when it comes to his fight prep, he does it more diligently than anybody. So I wouldn't think that Tom would necessarily steamroll him. So I would say overreaction.
But would you agree with the assessment that did Jones not look like he lost a step? Did he not look? And I'll say this. I will say he was coming off of his own layoff with the surgery, 15 months off, or maybe it was more like 16 or 17 months off, 18 months off since he fought. And I realized that too. So I will say, like it was still somewhat like a mildly impressive performance from Jon. But Jon, by the time if he does fight Tom Aspinall, he'll be 38 most likely by the time we get to that fight. If it does happen, time doesn't make you faster. And I saw a Jones that was just a little bit slower. You don't agree with that?
Maybe it's heavyweight, maybe the extra weight, but I don't know. That's not the performance. And I know I'm fully aware that Stipe is not the Stipe Miocic of old, and he looked every bit of a 42-year-old, and he did look a lot slower. But Jon just looked basically untouched in that fight. So coming off of that performance, it's tough for me to look at that specific performance and be like, all right, he's getting steamrolled by Tom Aspinall, if you know what I mean. I just think that Jon, if he's motivated, the way he preps for his fights and whatnot, his fight IQ, I could never rule him out of, a fight against Aspinall.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, the fight IQ, it's like the great argument for Jon Jones. Like he can probably fight longer into his career, even as he slows down, because of the fight IQ. I will concede that he's always been one of the smartest fighters. He's maybe the smartest fighter that we've seen in the cage. So anyways, okay. So now let's move on to something else with Jon Jones here, because we're talking about Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall. It's what we want to see. Jon obviously has made it clear. Well, you touched on it earlier. Maybe it's a negotiating tactic, okay? But he's made it clear that he wants to fight Alex Pereira because that's the bigger legacy fight. Dana White has obviously made it pretty clear that he wants to see Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall, and he's even said it could be the biggest fight that they possibly do. So let me tell you something here, Farah. The honeymoon is over, and things are about to get ugly between Jon Jones and Dana White.
Overreaction, because I feel like, I'll tell you why. I feel like
you think this negotiation is going to go smoothly, and we're not going to get some public smack talk going on between the two of them?
I feel like Dana White is just saying that Tom Aspinall is next, and that's a fight to make because that's what he's supposed to say as a promoter. Because how is he going to look if he says anything else? I feel like when Jon Jones takes some time off, things change. Aspinall might be chomping at the bit. He might end up competing. Who knows what happens with Alex Pereira? He could compete and lose, and then the narratives will change. I think narratives change too often in MMA. I think Dana White has to, as a promoter, say that Aspinall's next because it'll be wild for him not to say that he's your interim champion. How could you say otherwise? I think Dana White does what Jon Jones wants at the end.
You do? It ends up being Jon Jones against Alex Pereira.
I don't really know what Jon Jones really wants.
When you say what Jon Jones wants, what are you saying that is?
Well, clearly he's mentioned Alex Pereira, but for Jon Jones, if he gets sold on the idea of Tom Aspinall, if it is just a matter of money, they will take care of him whatever he wants. I don't know if he's going to ask for some astronomical number in terms of what Dana White looks at as astronomical, but I do believe that he'll do what Jon Jones wants. I just think that he has to.
Wow, I'm surprised. I mean, listen, I'm thinking back to 2020 when we were all clamoring for Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou. Okay,
but have you not seen the way Dana's talked about Jon Jones lately? When have you
But that's the thing. I know the way he's been glazing him lately. I get it, and all that stuff is about fight stuff. It's about him being the greatest of all time. It's about him being the pound for pound number one. But Dana White has always had that stance with Jon Jones. He's always maintained that Jon Jones is the GOAT. The problem that they've always had, the two of them in their relationship, is that he hasn't always been willing to compensate Jon Jones the way Jon wants to be compensated. And so I go back to 2020 when we wanted to see Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou. And if you remember, at that time, the thing that Dana White couldn't believe was that Jon Jones apparently had asked for quote unquote Deontay Wilder money. Do you remember that? Do you remember that being a big thing? And the Deontay Wilder money reference at that time was $30 million that he reportedly had made in a fight with Tyson Fury earlier that year. I just remember how that whole saga went down, and ultimately it's one of the key reasons why we never got to see Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou was because Dana and the UFC weren't willing to pony up the money. So, do you not think that this could go sideways completely and that maybe, just maybe, Jon Jones doesn't fight again?
I mean, you make good points, and the only thing that I can think of right now is because that I'm surprised that Dana's calling Aspinall and Jones the biggest heavyweight fight ever or whatnot, considering
because now what is Jon Jones supposed to think once he says that? He's going to want to get paid accordingly.
He will. Okay, I get it. I don't know. I just don't, with the way Dana White's been kind of glazing Jon Jones, the way he's been talking about it, I just don't have this gut feeling that we're going to get into some like nasty war where they're not going to come to terms or whatnot. I just feel like, although he does mention that, maybe him and Jon aren't like best of friends. Like, it's not the way he talks about Ronda Rousey, right? He always talked about Ronda Rousey business-wise being like the best
person to work with ever and all that stuff. He even still speaks about Conor McGregor in that way.
Yeah. So I agree, but I don't know. I just don't see a world. I think right now I don't see a world where we're going to get some sort of war between the two of them and whatnot. I feel like Jones does what he wants, whether it's walk away, fight Alex Pereira, because I don't even know like pay-per-view numbers wise and stuff like that, if Aspinall Jones would be bigger than Pereira and Jones. I don't see that as an obvious statement. So if you're talking about money and buys, if that's the selling point, then I don't know if that's necessarily true. And I'm sure I'm going to get hammered by that in the comment section, but I'm talking about like business wise. I don't know if it's so obvious that Aspinall and Jones is bigger than Jones and Pereira, if we're talking business.
Well, yeah, no, I would agree with that. I don't know. I really don't know which one's bigger business wise. I mean, there's an argument to be made that it's the Alex Pereira fight because of where he stands right now. His standing, his popularity is at an all-time high, but damn it, if Tom Aspinall's popularity isn't at an all-time high, the chance for him at the press conference, that was pretty freaking amazing. And I thought to myself, well, maybe that is the moment that Jon Jones is going to be convinced to fight Tom Aspinall. But I do think history is going to repeat itself between Jon Jones and Dana White as this negotiation. We'll see where it takes us. So, but you think it's an overreaction, but we'll see how it plays out. All right. So, okay.
Very Dana White-like answer from you.
We'll see how this thing plays out. All right. Okay. So we're gonna move on to the co-main event of UFC 309 now, and up until the last, middle of the 5th round, it was pretty much a masterclass from Charles Oliveira. But then Michael Chandler caught Charles Oliveira with one punch and made it pretty interesting. But Dobronx was able to survive. Afterwards, they both talked in the cage, and I want to focus on Michael Chandler and his freaking cringe call out of Conor McGregor. Just here's what I'm going to hit you with, Farah. Michael Chandler should stop acting so desperate to fight Conor McGregor.
That's not an overreaction. I just didn't see like that as a appropriate moment for a call out, especially because obviously recency bias. You remember that last part of the fight, and it was entertaining as well. But prior to that, he did not look very good.
No.
I know Charles Oliveira is a great fighter, but the way their first fight went in comparison to this, you could tell the layoff played a factor. You could tell with this performance that Michael Chandler is probably no longer considered in the upper echelon of the division. He's 2-4 in the UFC. Losses to Gaethje, Poirier, Oliveira twice. Last win came over Tony Ferguson. I just think it's a rough spot. Daniel Cormier seems to love that Michael Chandler did that. I just don't think it was the exact appropriate moment. Conor McGregor, at the end of the day, like whether he comes back or not, is coming off of a massive layoff himself. He's coming off of back-to-back losses. Who knows what he's going to look like anyway. So I guess the idea of him fighting Chandler isn't really out of the window because they're both in a similar spot. I just don't think that was the moment to make this crazy call out. Like if it was a very competitive fight with Oliveira throughout, sure, right, maybe.
But he had those last couple minutes. He had the 2 body slams. He must have been feeling himself in the moment. It's just it's just so cringe and it's so unbecoming. I mean, are you really going to let's just say he got Conor McGregor's attention. Let's just say he got Conor's attention. Are you really going to put your career on hold again for Conor McGregor? Even if they were to hypothetically agree to a fight in the next few months, that let's just say won't happen until International Fight Week or maybe MSG next November, okay? July or November. You're really going to put your career on hold again? Because you don't even know if Conor McGregor is going to show up to the cage.
Yeah, no, this layoff hurt him. It was clear. Like it hurt him. Like he was coming off of those fights. Like he had good moments against Gaethje. He had good moments against Dustin Poirier. He had good moments against Charles Oliveira. This wasn't one of those fights. This was kind of like a late rally, like almost was going to be considered one of the greatest comebacks, right? In UFC history, if he pulled it off. So I don't like how he looked in that fight. He's always in shape. I get that. But clearly the layoff hurt him. He's 38 years old right now. I just think that this performance showed how much that layoff hurt and how much he shouldn't have waited for Conor McGregor all this time. So Dana White is talking about McGregor coming back in late 2025. That's another year out. Is Michael Chandler seriously considering that? Like, and this wasn't even one of those rock'em sock'em wars. Like he was just controlled on the ground. So he actually weirdly took less damage than he did in his other ones.
Yeah, he can get back in there. I mean, it is interesting. I just want to hit you with this one time and ask you about just Chandler's approach. Okay. Since he came over from Bellator, where he was a very accomplished Bellator fighter. He was a multiple-time champion over in Bellator. He did come to the UFC, it just seems, with a mindset of just throwing the pedigree out and just wanting to entertain. Do you think he's ultimately winning at this stage of his career in the end? Like, is he winning this stage of his career by just being the action-crazy Michael Chandler fighter? Because it does feel like he could win more fights if he wanted to at least make the attempt, but it just doesn't seem like he's interested in fighting smart at all.
Yeah, no, I do think at this point he is winning, especially when you have Dana White saying that this is always going to be your home. Like he doesn't care about Michael Chandler's record. It's just he's lucky with lightweight, that lightweight has enough notable names that you can match him up with a lot of fun guys. I just think that this performance takes him out of the upper echelon of the division. I just don't want to hear him tying his name to anybody in the top 5 anymore. Like it just does not make sense. Even this Oliveira fight, Oliveira had a lot to lose and he had a lot to gain. And he didn't end up capitalizing on that opportunity. At the end of the day, like it's just Oliveira looked levels above him in that fight. He's just lucky that lightweight is a big enough division where you could match him up with anybody and anyone's going to want to fight him because he's become a fan favorite and he made sure to remind people of that. So it was a little bit smart for him, maybe not fight IQ wise, but smart of him the way he ended the fight and stuff to kind of remind people why people love to watch him fight.
Well, maybe Michael Chandler has reached this status where he's like a Nate Diaz, where even if he loses, he still wins. He still wins. So, I guess that's something to hang your hat on. And he's got Dana White's approval to do, for the rest of his career, however long he wants to fight. So maybe he's winning in some ways. I'll concede that. But please stop with the cringe Conor McGregor call-outs. It's killing me, man. Okay. Another thing at UFC 309, in the featured bout, we had Nickal against Paul Craig. Fight went, it was a fight. It was a fight that went 30-27 times 3. But if you watched me last week, myself and Danny last week, I was expecting a breakout performance. So it shouldn't come as any surprise, Farah, for me to come and hit you with this. Nickal's UFC 309 performance was a huge disappointment.
Not an overreaction. I think it's fair to call him overrated at that point. If you're a 1,400
20,000 fans call them overrated.
Yeah, if you're a 1,400 favorite at one point, and this is how you perform. And I'm not trying to knock on him. I get it. He's not the one that creates the odds. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, he said in an interview with Ariel Helwani that he thought the odds would be bigger. I don't know if he was being sarcastic, but clearly he said it out loud. If you're going to say stuff like that, if you're going to say you're going to dominate Shara Bullet, if you're going to talk about Khamzat Chimaev, you can't come out with a performance like that. And the problem I have with this performance, I get it. It was technically the smart thing to do because you don't want to get into Paul Craig's guard. We saw him get dominated by Ankalaev. He ends up finishing Ankalaev. He finished Jamal Hill. I get it. He's dangerous. But you look at someone like Khamzat Chimaev. Khamzat Chimaev is not scared to grapple with anybody. He just goes out there. If you're the standout wrestler, I would have thought at least you would have dabbled a little bit in that world. And he kind of alluded to that in media day that he'd do it. He has no problem doing it. So to come out there and have a striking battle with a guy, no offense in Paul Craig, but no threat or crazy threat on the feet. This isn't Khamzat Whitaker where Whitaker is really dangerous on the feet. It's Paul Craig isn't exactly known for his striking. So for you to just kind of lunge overhand rights and just have a lackluster striking affair and to call your performance picture perfect after that, I don't know. I have an issue with all that. And don't get me wrong, I still think there's potential. I'm not ready to write him off of one performance. I need to see more. But I just think he needs to kind of slow his roll. Dana kind of talked about that a little bit because he talks a big game. That's the only issue I have. I don't have a problem with the confidence. You have to be confident to succeed. But he's talked a big game and it just has not that. That was your opportunity. Paul Craig was tailor-made for you. It's a guy who has those big wins, so you can call him your most experienced opponent to date. You got it on a pay-per-view main card, which I guess he usually does. That was your chance. That was your opportunity to kind of break into the upper echelon of the division in a kind of a tailor-made matchup for you, and you failed to pass that test, in my opinion. So I think he takes a back step here. It's not like that plan. He talked about the 5-fight plan or whatnot. Yeah. I think he takes a back step and he needs to slow his roll. I'm not saying the potential is not there, but
it might be, but this could not have gone worse for him. I mean, he had Madison Square Garden in the palm of his hands on the walkout. They were cheering for him loudly, and Donald Trump sitting in front, the ties. He said Donald Trump said that he's his favorite fighter. He had the Garden in the palm of his hands during the walkout. And then 15 minutes later, he had 20,000 people chanting overrated. And I couldn't blame them. Just like you said, you cannot come into this fight saying you're going to beat Shara Bullet in 90 seconds. You can't be talking about Khamzat and then give us that performance. The problem I had was he's got work to do with his hands. The striking that I saw, a lot of left-handed, double left-handed punching. It just didn't look. He's got work to do in that department. And I don't know, where do you think he goes next? What's the right opponent for him? I don't think he can fight anybody in the top 15, can he?
No, I don't think so. I think you can find, I can't think of the top of my head right now, but I'm sure there is a notable enough name that isn't in the top 15. I think that's where you go with him. A veteran.
He certainly shouldn't be in the rankings. I sure hope the UFC rankings panel doesn't put him in the top 15, but you never know, Farah.
Let's see MMA Junkie AI. What's that called for us? But I think the way you go with him is a notable name that's like a veteran on the downside type of thing that has the name where you could still throw him in a pay-per-view, justify throwing him in a pay-per-view main card or a big enough card. But I just wanted to see more risk from him. I just want, you have the wrestling pedigree. He could have literally just picked up Craig, slammed him, let him get back up. You don't have to jump in his guard. I'm not saying chill in his guard and get caught in something, but just kind of show something off. Like even freaking Michael Chandler managed to give us something when he was down and getting dominated so badly. Give us something, like slam Paul Craig down, tell him to get back up, strike with him a little bit, slam him down again, like show off something. You know what I mean? That's the only issue I had with him. No risk taking. It was lackluster. He heard the crowd. Yeah, but he's still raw. He's still green. It's just he talks a big game and he just didn't live up to it. Not yet, at least.
Yeah, would have been a nice springboard for him, but we're going to have to wait for that springboard moment at some other point. Man, I love how fired up you were about the Bo Nickal performance. I didn't think you would match my energy there because I just was super. Last week, I was raving about a breakout performance, and I was so upset on Saturday night watching him just hesitant as can be.
I was upset too. It was 5:30 a.m. I'm exhausted. I wanted something. I thought he was going to be one of the performance of the night bonuses.
That's what I thought too. I truly thought that.
So I don't mean to like crap on him, but the expectations are high from us too. So that's a compliment in a way. But I just say like he needs some work.
All right. Okay. We're going to move away from UFC 309 now, Farah, because on Saturday we did have the fights at Madison Square Garden, but we had an appetizer on Friday night. You may have heard that Jake Paul and Mike Tyson, they fought in the ring, or they did something in the ring. And the only thing I have to say about Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson, Farah, is what the hell was that?
Not an overreaction. I'd be crazy to call that an overreaction. Like, yeah, I don't know. I will give them this because nobody around me, not my basketball crew, nobody really knows MMA or watches it. Everyone was talking to me about that fight. I was surprised.
Commercially popular. Yeah. What a splash for Netflix, and what a event as a whole. I mean, I will give them credit for all of that stuff. Like I didn't know what the attendance would be like. I thought maybe it was going to be Cowboy Stadium in just the lower bowl, the lower section of the stadium. When I saw Matt Wells, who was there for us, tweeting about how the rafters were packed, and then we hear it's about 70,000, which probably is legit. It probably was about 70,000. I couldn't believe that. I was like, wow, and just the fight night it felt like a huge event. But man, the fight itself, once Mike got into the third round, what were we doing?
Yeah, I mean, I love how everybody I know was like to me, oh, you got it right. I'm like, I don't even feel smart. It's just
no, I don't feel smart either.
This wasn't one of those predictions where I'm like, see, I told you so. Like, I knew it from the start, and I knew I'm not surprised that he says he tried to carry him later on, and so none of that surprises me. It's exactly the way I thought it would go. That Mike Tyson maybe was going to try to swing for the fences in the beginning, try to land something. Later on, he was going to gas. Later on, he was so ill. He talked about nearly dying before the fight. Like, what are we doing here? So the fact that I don't know what Jake Paul is doing. Like, he's obviously business-wise, money-wise, he's doing a great job and stuff. But you're also talking about wanting to be champion and talking about Canelo. They don't go hand in hand. That's the problem I have. Yeah, like, if you want to just be that guy and go after Mike Tyson, go after these names, fine, just do that thing. But you're also talking about being a champion and wanting to fight Canelo. You beat Mike Tyson, you call out Canelo. It doesn't even
no, they don't go hand in hand. But here's the crazy thing though. Do you think he's going to get somebody's attention like a Canelo, or somebody that is a well-respected upper echelon? Is he going to get someone's attention because the money and the interest just makes too much sense?
I think so. Sadly, I think so. I think so. Eventually, he's going to get someone's attention. Maybe not Canelo, not someone who's still fighting at a high level, but eventually to get someone who's notable, but kind of on the downside. He managed to do it with the UFC guys. I think he'll manage to do it with boxing as well. Someone eventually, when they're seeing, because money seems to really get like, how many times have we seen fighters fight for too long and just for the money? So I wouldn't be surprised if someone notable in boxing, preferably not 58 years old, eventually. Maybe 48. Maybe 48 or 38.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We're going to end that segment there because I don't want to talk anymore about that fight. I just want to cleanse myself, but we had to address it. That was terrible. I hope we don't see anything like it again. But I will say though, at this point, I'm going to be interested in whatever Jake Paul does. It just is what it is at this point.
That's the problem. We are the problem. We watch. We're
going to watch,
I stayed up for that.
And you regret it. You regret it every moment.
I'm exhausted. I'm still exhausted. I'm still recovering from the weekend, back to back. But I did
back to back nights for you. Yeah. Sorry, Farah. Okay. We're going to move on to the last thing we're going to talk about, and that is what happened with the shakeup for the end of the year in the UFC between UFC 310 and UFC Tampa. So just so we can recap real fast, it was supposed to be Bilal Muhammad defending his title against Shavkat Rakhmonov. Bilal, we know, got the toe infection or the foot infection. He's out. UFC originally they didn't make a change to UFC 310. We didn't know what was going on with UFC 310. We didn't know what was going on with Shavkat. But what we did know was that Ian Machado Gary was going to fight Joaquin Buckley in the UFC Tampa headliner. And I said a couple episodes ago, that really upset me. That really upset me. I was like, they dropped the ball. And here I am telling you now, Farah, that the UFC totally redeemed itself with the UFC 310 and UFC Tampa shakeup.
Oh, agreed. Definitely not.
We're getting Shavkat against Ian Machado Gary because I asked for it on this show.
not an overreaction. I like it. I didn't like really the Kamaru Usman fight. I understand that Kamaru is a future Hall of Famer, former champion and stuff, but he wouldn't have even gotten a proper full camp. Like, what are we doing here? Same scenario as the Hamza Chimaev fight, although credit to Kamaru, he performed very well. But why is my question? Like, why? Give Kamaru his respect of getting into a proper camp and having a fight. A lot to gain for him, I understand, but going against another undefeated killer, he kind of spoke about it in his podcast, saying that December was a little too early for him. So I'm kind of glad it didn't work out for him. And I guess credit to Ian Machado Gary. I mean, if anything can get some fans his side, it's got to be this. Although I'm pretty sure they're going to boo him and cheer for Shavkat, but at least he can get somebody's respect here, because obviously he gets hated on a lot and didn't have the greatest performance against MVP. It was a grapple fest, not what I expected either, but Shavkat's no joke.
It's just freaking awesome. I mean, you don't get two up and coming guys this far, but they're this far into their career and they're still both undefeated. You just don't get this that often, and that's why I'm so happy that this all worked out. I'm super intrigued by this fight.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit back in the day, but maybe they weren't as far along with Jon Jones and Ryan Bader. When they were both,
good reference point there. Yes, absolutely.
So yeah, I like the fight. I love it. Credit to Ian. I hope he gets some love for this and stops getting crapped on, because at the end of the day, he is a talented fighter. Maybe the MVP fight didn't exactly elevate his stock, but you're going up against Shavkat, a guy who boasts a 100% finish rate. So you know there's going to be action in this fight, because if Ian doesn't want to jump into the fire, Shavkat will pull him in.
Yeah. Okay. And then the flip side of this now is that we have the return of America's favorite nerd and virgin, Colby Covington. He's going to fight Joaquin Buckley now in headline UFC Tampa. So what do you think of that matchup?
I'm very surprised Covington agreed to this fight. I don't know what he sees that makes him think, because when I was looking back, he was talking about Wonderboy Thompson. That was a call out. It was a smart call out, because obviously the path to victory is right there, right? Grapple the hell out of Wonderboy. Wonderboy has a name. He's a former title challenger. Easy fight to put in a pay-per-view. Joaquin Buckley's a risky fight. The guy packs tons of power. He's super athletic. He can grapple too. I don't know if you're just going to be able to ragdoll Joaquin Buckley. It's a tough fight, and it's a big risk and low reward, in my opinion. So I'm very surprised that Colby Covington took this fight.
Yeah.
Dana White keeps reiterating that Colby Covington doesn't turn down fights. He insists on that. A lot of times it appears that Colby's turning down fights, but they say contract. So I don't want to make something up or that, but Dana insists. So clearly this is proof that he doesn't, because I don't understand what he sees to gain out of this fight against Joaquin Buckley. I think Buckley has everything to gain. I think Covington has everything to lose, because you lose to Joaquin Buckley, you're done.
Have we heard from Colby about this fight yet? Has he posted anything on social media in the past 48 hours?
Don't you think we're not going to see it?
I'm just saying, Farah, optics are everything. You go ahead and announce it this way, but who knows what could happen in the next, maybe even this week.
I never signed the contract.
I'm just saying, if we haven't heard from him, is this fight really happening? It's the UFC we're talking about here. I do believe that we're going to see Shavkat against Ian Machado Gary, but are we really going to see Joaquin Buckley against Colby Covington? I don't know.
No, it's not a.
You wouldn't put it past them. That is not an overreaction, right?
No, that isn't. We've seen posters get published before the fight's not happening, just like Nick Diaz, right? So yeah, there you go. But yeah, I'm just surprised that Colby took this fight. I don't see too much to gain. Yeah. They could have just gave him something else, right? Like they didn't have to do the switcheroo type of thing. They could have given Buckley anybody else. Buckley's always down to fight anybody. They could have, and he's on kind of a winning streak, so anybody would have been good for him in the top 5. But I guess they wanted to reward Joaquin Buckley for pulling that fight.
Yeah,
away
I mean,
from him.
Buckley deserves the reward. I'm like,
Oh,
but
100%.
like you,
Yeah.
but like you, I'm just surprised that Colby agreed to it. And now I'm just putting some dots together here. So yeah, I'm connecting the dots. So I don't know. I hope we see the fight. I mean, it's an intriguing fight. I'm down to see it. And if Colby, you know, as much as I cringe at Colby all the time, if he actually steps into the cage and fights Joaquin Buckley, props to him for taking the fight. You know, it's definitely a risky fight, but it's also a fight that could still show that you are still in that upper echelon of the welterweight division. So I hope he gets there. I just don't know that we're going to get there.
I guess we'll see how it plays out.
Yes, we will, Farah. All right. Well, the time for overreacting has come to an end. Farah, thank you for coming back on the show. I hope you enjoyed yourself.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, that was good. That was good. All right. And for everybody who's tuned in this long, I appreciate you guys sticking with us till the end. And we will see you next week on Overreaction Time. So long.
MMA Junkie AI.